The morning sun rose over the city of New Portland on the planet called Haven's Rest. It was a beautiful world, green and peaceful, with rolling hills covered in farms and forests that stretched as far as anyone could see. The sky was a soft purple color, different from Earth's blue, but the humans who lived there had grown to love it. They called it home. Haven's Rest was the largest human colony outside of Earth's solar system. Over 50 million people lived there, spread across 3 continents. They had built cities and towns, schools and hospitals, factories and farms. For nearly 200 years, humans had lived on this world in peace. The Galactic Empire allowed them to stay, and in return, humans paid taxes and followed the Empire's laws. They were an ancient species. They had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Their empire covered more than 4,000 worlds, and their fleets numbered in the tens of thousands. To them, humans were a young and unimportant species. They had only been traveling among the stars for 800 years. They controlled only 17 star systems. They were like children playing in a corner of the galaxy that they did not particularly want. But they watched everything. They kept records of every species under their control. They tracked population numbers, military strength, and technological development. They had rules about how fast a species could grow and how powerful they could become. Any species that grew too quickly would be dealt with. On this particular morning, none of the humans on Haven's Rest were thinking about They were thinking about the celebration that was about to begin. It was Founding Day, the anniversary of the first human landing on Haven's Rest. Every year, the entire planet celebrated with festivals, parades, and gatherings. But this year was special. This was the 200th anniversary, and the planetary government had organized the largest celebration in the colony's history. 800,000 children had traveled to New Portland for the event. They came from every city, every town, and every farming community on the planet. Schools had organized trips months in advance. Parents had saved money to send their children to the capital. It was supposed to be the greatest day of their young lives. Lucy Grant was 11 years old. She sat on a transport bus with 43 other children from her school in the small town of Riverside. Her best friend, Emma, sat beside her, and they talked excitedly about everything they were going to see. The Central Memorial Park was supposed to be enormous, with games and rides and food from every human colony. There would be music and dancing and fireworks when the sun went down. "My mom said they're going to have real ice cream from Earth," Emma said. "Not the synthetic stuff, real ice cream made from real milk." Lucy's eyes went wide. She had never tasted real Earth food. Everything on Haven's Rest was grown locally or made in factories. Real food from Earth was expensive, something only rich people could afford. "Do you think we'll get to try some?" Lucy asked. "My mom gave me extra credits," Emma said, holding up a small card. "She said I could buy whatever I wanted." Their teacher, Mr., stood at the front of the bus and clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been teaching at Riverside Elementary for 30 years, and he loved his students like they were his own children. "All right, everyone," he said. "We'll be arriving in about 20 minutes. When we get there, I want everyone to stay together, no wandering off. If you need to use the bathroom, you tell me or Mrs. Collins first. Understood?" "Yes, mister," the children said together. The bus flew over the countryside, passing farms and small villages. Other buses flew alongside them, all heading toward New Portland. The sky was filled with transports of every size, carrying children from all over the planet. It was like a river of vehicles flowing toward the capital. On the other side of the planet, a boy named Shaw was also traveling to the celebration. He was 14 years old, older than most of the other children, and he had been chosen to give a speech at the main ceremony. Was one of the students on Haven's Rest. He had won competitions in mathematics, science, and public speaking. His parents were incredibly proud of him. His father, Richard Shaw, sat beside him on their private transport. Richard was a successful businessman who owned several factories on Haven's Rest. He had the money to hire a private ship instead of using the public buses. "Are you nervous?" Richard asked his son. Shook his head. "A little, but I've practiced my speech 100 times. I know it by heart." Richard smiled and put his hand on his shoulder. "You're going to do great. Your mother and I will be watching from the VIP section. We'll be cheering louder than anyone. Mother Diana sat across from them, looking at her communication device. She was checking the news, reading about the celebration. Every channel was covering the event. It was the biggest story on the planet. They're expecting over 1 million people in the park, Diana said. 800,000 children and another 200,000 adults. Can you imagine? It's going to be incredible, Richard said. The biggest gathering in the colony's history. In orbit above Haven's Rest, the observation station continued its silent watch. The station had been there for 200 years, monitoring human activity on the planet below. A crew of 12 officers recorded everything they saw and sent reports back to the Empire's capital. Commander stood at the main observation window, looking down at the planet. He was tall and thin, with pale gray skin and large black eyes. Like all, he had 4 arms and moved with a strange, fluid grace. He had been stationed above Haven's Rest for 5 years, and he found the assignment incredibly boring. Humans were not interesting to watch. They lived simple lives, worked simple jobs, and caused no trouble. Commander, one of his officers said, "We have received a message from High Command." Turned away from the window. What does it say? The officer's face was expressionless, but his voice carried a hint of confusion. "We are ordered to withdraw from orbit immediately. A fleet is being dispatched to this location." "A fleet," repeated. "Why would they send a fleet here?" "The message does not explain, Commander. We are simply ordered to leave." Felt a strange sensation in his chest. In 5 years, nothing had ever happened at this station. No alerts, no emergencies, no unusual orders. And now, suddenly, a fleet was coming. "How long until they arrive?" "The message says they will be here within 6 hours." Looked back at the planet. On the surface, he could see the lights of New Portland even in the daylight. So many humans gathered in one place. A thought occurred to him, dark and terrible, but he pushed it away. The Empire would never do something like that, not to children. "Begin withdrawal procedures," he ordered. "We will leave as commanded." The observation station powered up its engines and began to move away from the planet. Below, the humans continued their celebration, completely unaware that anything had changed. In New Portland, the Central Memorial Park was filling up with people. The park covered nearly 10 square kilometers, with open fields, walking paths, gardens, and a massive amphitheater at the center. Stages had been set up throughout the park, each one hosting different performances. Food vendors lined the main walkways, selling everything from local dishes to exotic treats from other colonies. Lucy and Emma walked through the park with their classmates, their eyes wide with wonder. They had never seen so many people in one place. Children ran past them, laughing and playing. Music filled the air from every direction. The smell of cooking food made their stomachs growl. "Look at that," Emma shouted, pointing at a nearby stage. A group of performers was doing acrobatic tricks, flipping and spinning through the air with the help of anti-gravity belts. The children gathered to watch, cheering and clapping as the performers flew higher and higher. Mr. kept count of his students, making sure no one wandered too far. He had a list on his communication device, and he checked it constantly. 44 children in his group. 44 lives that he was responsible for. It was a heavy weight, but he was proud to carry it. Across the park, Shaw walked with his parents toward the main amphitheater. They had VIP passes that allowed them to skip the long lines and enter through a special entrance. Security officers checked their identification and waved them through. The amphitheater was enormous, with seating for over 100,000 people. A massive stage stood at the front, decorated with the flags of all 17 human colonies. Giant screens displayed images of Haven's Rest, showing its history from the first landing to the present day. Would give his speech in 3 hours, after the opening ceremonies and the governor's address. He had time to relax and enjoy the celebration before then. His parents found their seats in the VIP section and sat between them, watching the crowds fill in around them. "This is amazing," said quietly. His mother took his hand and squeezed it. "You deserve to be here. You've worked so hard." Far above the planet, the observation station had moved to a safe distance. Commander watched his instruments, waiting for the fleet to arrive. His crew was silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts. "Commander," the sensor officer said suddenly, "I'm detecting multiple jump signatures. The fleet is arriving." Looked at his screen. His blood ran cold. 12 ships emerged from hyperspace. But these were not ordinary patrol vessels or diplomatic cruisers. These were Decimator-class warships, the most powerful weapons in the arsenal. Each one was over 5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons capable of destroying entire cities in seconds. 12 decimators, the sensor officer whispered. Why would they send 12 decimators to a peaceful colony? Did not answer. He knew why. He had suspected it from the moment he received the withdrawal order, but he had not wanted to believe it. They had rules about population growth. They had limits that no species was allowed to exceed, and humans had been growing too fast. Their population had doubled in the last century. Their colonies were expanding. Their technology was improving. The Empire had decided to send a message. "Should we contact them, Commander?" one of his officers asked. "No," said quietly. "We were ordered to withdraw. We will observe from this distance and nothing more." The 12 decimators moved toward the planet in formation. They did not respond to any of the automated hails from the planetary defense network. They did not identify themselves or state their purpose. They simply flew toward Haven's Rest in perfect silence. On the surface, no one noticed. The planetary defense systems detected the ships, but vessels were not considered threats. They were allies, protectors, the rulers of the galaxy who kept order among the stars. The defense officers assumed it was some kind of inspection or official visit. They did not raise any alarms. In the Central Memorial Park, the celebration continued. Children played games, ate food, and watched performances. The sun climbed higher in the purple sky, and the temperature grew warm and pleasant. It was a perfect day, the kind of day that people would remember forever. Lucy Grant won a stuffed animal at a game booth. It was a small creature with purple fur and big blue eyes, designed to look like one of the native animals of Haven's Rest. She hugged it tightly and showed it to Emma. "I'm going to call him Starlight," Lucy said. "That's a perfect name," Emma agreed. Mr. gathered his students near a food vendor and bought everyone lunch. They sat together on the grass, eating sandwiches and drinking fruit juice, talking about everything they had seen so far. Some of the children were tired, but none of them wanted to leave. There was still so much to do, so much to see. In the amphitheater, the opening ceremonies began. The governor of Haven's Rest walked onto the stage, and the crowd erupted in applause. She was a middle-aged woman named Governor Wells, and she had led the colony for the past 15 years. She was popular and well-liked, known for her kindness and her dedication to the people. "Welcome everyone to the 200th anniversary of Haven's Rest," she announced, her voice amplified across the entire park. 200 years ago, our ancestors landed on this world with nothing but hope and determination. They built farms in the wilderness, cities in the empty lands, and a civilization that spans an entire planet. Today, we celebrate their courage and their vision. Today, we celebrate everything that makes us human. The crowd cheered, flags waved. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, watching the giant screens that displayed the governor's image. Shaw listened to the speech, feeling the excitement build in his chest. Soon it would be his turn. Soon he would stand on that stage and address the entire planet. He had worked so hard to get here. His whole life had led to this moment. In orbit, the 12 decimators reached their positions. They spread out around the planet, forming a ring that covered every major population center. The lead ship, the Voice of Empire, transmitted a single message to the planetary defense network. "This is Fleet Admiral of the Imperial Navy. All human defense systems are to stand down immediately. Any resistance will be met with total destruction. You have 5 minutes to comply." The message was received at the main defense headquarters in New Portland. Colonel Stephen read it 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. He tried to contact the ships, asking for clarification, asking what was happening, asking why. There was no response. Colonel had served in the Earth Defense Coalition for 30 years before retiring to Haven's Rest. He had fought in border skirmishes and patrol actions. He had faced danger many times, but he had never felt the cold fear that gripped him now. "Stand down all weapons," he ordered his officers. "Do it now." "Sir," one of the officers asked, confused. "Do it," shouted. "Those are Decimator-class warships. We have nothing that can even scratch them. If we fight, they'll destroy the entire planet. Stand down now." The defense systems powered down across the planet. Shields dropped. Weapons went offline. Haven's Rest lay completely defenseless before the fleet. In the Central Memorial Park, no one knew what was happening. The celebration continued. The governor finished her speech and introduced the next performer, a famous singer from Earth who had traveled to Haven's Rest just for this event. The crowd swayed to the music, parents dancing with their children, young couples holding hands. Lucy Grant sat with her classmates, watching a puppet show about the founding of the colony. The puppets acted out the story of the first settlers, their struggles and their triumphs. Lucy laughed at the funny parts and felt tears in her eyes during the sad parts. It was a wonderful story, the story of her people. Shaw's mother noticed something strange. She was looking at her communication device, trying to check the news, but all the channels had gone silent, every single one. She tried to call her sister in another city, but the call would not connect. "Richard," she said quietly, "something is wrong." Richard Shaw took out his own device and tried to make a call. Nothing. He tried to access the planetary network. Nothing. Every form of communication had been blocked. "Stay calm," he said, though his voice was not calm at all. "It might just be a technical problem." But it was not a technical problem. The fleet had activated jamming systems that blocked all communications on the planet. No one could call for help. No one could warn anyone. No one could do anything. At 1447 local time, the voice of Empire transmitted a final message. This one was broadcast on every screen, every speaker, every device on the planet. Admiral's face appeared, cold and expressionless. "People of Haven's Rest, your species has violated the growth limitations established by the Galactic Empire. Your population has exceeded acceptable levels. Your military development has exceeded acceptable levels. The Empire has determined that corrective action is necessary. This action begins now." The message ended. The screens went dark. For a moment there was silence. People looked at each other in confusion. What did that mean? What was corrective action? No one understood. No one wanted to understand. Then the first ship opened fire. The energy beam came from the voice of Empire, a lance of blue-white light that struck the Central Memorial Park from orbit. It hit the eastern section first, where over 100,000 people had gathered to watch a parade. They never knew what happened. One moment they were there, alive and happy. The next moment they were gone, vaporized instantly by heat beyond imagination. The ground shook. A sound like thunder rolled across the park, louder than anything anyone had ever heard. People started screaming, running. Panic spread like wildfire through the crowd. Mr. grabbed Lucy and Emma by their hands. "Run," he shouted. "Everyone run, stay with me." The children ran. They did not know where they were going. They did not know what was happening. They only knew that they had to get away, had to escape, had to survive. But there was nowhere to escape to. The second beam hit the western section of the park. Then the third beam hit the north. Then the fourth hit the south. The 12 decimators fired in coordinated patterns, covering every part of the park, every part of the city, every gathering of people on the entire planet. Shaw stood in the amphitheater, frozen with fear. He watched the beams fall from the sky like the fingers of an angry god. He watched the stage explode in front of him, the governor disappearing in a flash of light. He watched his parents reach for him, their faces twisted in terror. The beam hit the VIP section directly, felt a moment of incredible heat, and then he felt nothing at all. In the eastern fields, Lucy ran as fast as her legs could carry her. She still held the stuffed animal she had won, Starlight, clutched against her chest. Mr. ran beside her, pulling Emma along with his other hand. The other children were scattered, some running ahead, some falling behind. A beam hit the ground 50 meters in front of them. The earth erupted in fire and smoke. Lucy was thrown backward by the shockwave, tumbling across the grass. When she opened her eyes, Mr. was gone. Emma was gone. She was alone. She got to her feet and kept running. There was nothing else she could do. She ran past burning wreckage and screaming people. She ran past bodies lying on the ground, bodies that had once been children like her. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs could barely move. The beams kept falling. Everywhere she looked, death came from the sky. Lucy found a small drainage ditch at the edge of the park. She crawled into it, pressing herself against the concrete wall, making herself as small as possible. She held starlight against her chest and closed her eyes. She prayed to whatever gods might be listening. She prayed for her parents, her friends, her teacher. She prayed for everyone. Above her, the ships continued their methodical destruction. They were not angry. They were not passionate. They were simply following orders, eliminating a problem that the Empire had identified. 800,000 children had gathered in one place, and the Empire had decided to make an example of them. The bombardment lasted 47 minutes. When it finally ended, the Central Memorial Park was a crater of glass and ash. 98% of everyone who had gathered there was dead. The survivors numbered in the hundreds, people like Lucy who had found shelter by chance or luck. Lucy stayed in the ditch for hours, too afraid to move. She heard ships flying overhead, but she did not know if they were or human. She heard voices calling out, but she did not know if they were rescuers or enemies. She stayed hidden until the sun went down and the purple sky turned black. Finally, she heard a voice she recognized. It was her father calling her name. "Lucy, Lucy, where are you? Lucy." She crawled out of the ditch on shaking legs. Her father saw her and ran toward her, tears streaming down his face. He grabbed her and held her so tightly that she could barely breathe. "You're alive," he sobbed. "You're alive, oh God, you're alive." Lucy's mother was there too, crying and holding both of them. They were alive. Somehow, against all odds, Lucy's family had survived. Her parents had been in a different part of the city, far from the park. When the attack began, they had taken shelter in a basement and waited until it was over. But Lucy's friends were gone. Emma was gone. Mr. was gone. Almost everyone she had traveled with that morning was gone. 800,000 children had come to New Portland for Founding Day. Less than 3,000 survived. News of the massacre spread across human space within hours. They had not tried to hide what they had done. In fact, they had broadcast footage of the attack to every human colony, making sure that everyone saw what happened to those who the Empire's rules. On Earth, Commander Gregory Cole received the transmission at the headquarters of the Earth Defense Coalition. He was a veteran officer with 20 years of experience, a man who had seen combat and death many times, but nothing had prepared him for what he saw on that screen. Children running, screaming, dying. He watched the footage 3 times, unable to look away. Each time he felt something breaking inside him. By the 3rd viewing, something new had taken the place of his grief. Something cold, something hard. Rage. Admiral Lane arrived at the headquarters an hour later. She was the highest-ranking officer in the entire Earth Defense Coalition, a woman who had dedicated her life to protecting humanity. She walked into the command center with her face like stone, but her eyes burned with an intensity that Cole had never seen before. "How many?" she asked quietly. 800,000 confirmed dead, Cole replied. Most of them children. The youngest was 4 years old. Lane closed her eyes. For a moment, she stood perfectly still, as if she was fighting to control something inside herself. When she opened her eyes again, her voice was calm and steady. "I want every available officer in the briefing room in 1 hour. And I want a secure channel to every human colony. We need to coordinate our response." "What response?" Cole asked. "They have 4,000 worlds. We have 17. Their fleets number in the tens of thousands. We have less than 100 warships. What can we possibly do?" Lane looked at him. There was something in her gaze that made Cole's blood run cold. Not fear, something else. Something that looked almost like anticipation. "We have been preparing for this day for 200 years, she said. They think they know everything about us. They monitor our planets, inspect our ships, count our weapons. They think we are weak. They think we are helpless. They are wrong. Cole did not understand what she meant. But he would learn. Every human would learn. The massacre on Haven's Rest was not the end of anything. It was the beginning. The emergency meeting of the United Earth Council took place 3 days after the massacre. Representatives from all 17 human colonies gathered via secure communication link, their faces grim and haunted. Many of them had lost family in the attack. All of them had lost something they could never get back. President Daniel addressed the council. He was a tall man in his 60s, with gray hair and deep lines on his face that had grown deeper in the past 3 days. He had been president for 8 years, and in that time he had faced many crises, but nothing like this. "We have received the official statement from the Empire," began. "They claim that the gathering on Haven's Rest was as a military assembly. They express regret for the loss of life, but maintain that their actions were justified under imperial law." A murmur of anger rippled through the council. This explanation was absurd. Everyone knew it was absurd. 800,000 children did not look like a military assembly. The Empire had not made a mistake. They had made a choice. "This was not an accident," continued. "Our intelligence services have confirmed that the attack was planned weeks in advance. They knew exactly what they were doing. They targeted our children deliberately as a message to the rest of humanity." "What message?" asked Governor Wells. She had survived the attack on Haven's Rest, one of only 3 government officials who had not been in the park when the bombing began. Her voice was hoarse from crying, but there was steel beneath the tears. "The message is simple," said. "They want us to know our place. They want us to stay small, weak, and afraid. They want us to bow our heads and accept whatever they choose to do to us. And if we do not—" He paused, his hands clenching into fists. "If we do not, they will do this again and again, until there are no humans left to defy them." Silence filled the chamber. The weight of the president's words pressed down on everyone like a physical force. They all understood what he was saying. They had not just killed 800,000 children, they had declared war on humanity itself. Admiral Lane stood up. "Mr. President, members of the council, I know that this moment feels hopeless. I know that many of you believe we have no chance against the Empire. But I am here to tell you that you are wrong." She activated a holographic display that showed the 17 human colonies spread across the stars. Then, with a gesture, she added new dots to the map. Dozens of them, hidden in regions of space that they had never explored. For 200 years, humanity has been preparing for this day. We knew that eventually the Empire would decide we had grown too powerful, too numerous, too threatening. We knew that they would try to destroy us. And so we built a second civilization, hidden from sensors, beyond the reach of their fleets. The council members stared at the map in disbelief. None of them had known about this. None of them had even suspected. "We have 37 hidden colonies," Lane continued. "They are home to over 2 billion people, most of them scientists, engineers, and military personnel. They have been developing weapons and technologies that they cannot imagine. Weapons that will change the balance of power in this galaxy forever." Governor Wells leaned forward. "Why were we not told about this?" "Security," Lane replied simply. "The fewer people who knew, the less chance of the information reaching the Empire. Even now, I am not revealing the locations of these colonies, only the fact that they exist." President spoke again. "Admiral Lane has presented us with a choice. We can accept these actions and submit to their rule, hoping that they will show mercy. Or we can fight back, using the resources we have been secretly gathering for centuries." "Fighting back would be suicide," said one of the council members, a man named Secretary. "Even with hidden colonies and secret weapons, we cannot defeat an empire that spans 4,000 worlds." "You are right," said. "We cannot defeat them, not today, but we can escape them. We can evacuate our people to the hidden colonies beyond the reach of fleets. We can rebuild, grow stronger, and one day return to claim what is rightfully ours." The council erupted in debate. Some argued for submission, hoping that cooperation would prevent further massacres. Others argued for immediate military action, demanding revenge for the children who had died. But slowly, a consensus began to form. Neither submission nor attack would save humanity. Only escape offered a chance of survival. The decision was made. Operation Exodus would begin immediately. Every human colony would begin secret evacuations, moving their populations to the hidden worlds beyond space. It would take years. It would be dangerous. Many would die. But it was the only way to ensure that humanity survived. On Haven's Rest, Lucy Grant sat in her bedroom, staring at the wall. Her parents had brought her home after the attack, but home did not feel like home anymore. Everything seemed strange and wrong, like she had woken up in a different universe where nothing made sense. She still had Starlight, the stuffed animal she had won at the celebration. It was the only thing she had kept from that day. Everything else, all her other belongings, seemed meaningless now. Only Starlight mattered because Starlight was the last memory of the life she had lost. Her father knocked on her door and entered slowly. Richard Grant was a farmer, a simple man who had never been involved in politics or war. He did not know what to say to his daughter. He did not know how to help her. He only knew that he loved her more than anything in the universe. "Lucy," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." Lucy looked at him but did not speak. She had barely spoken since the attack. The words seemed trapped inside her, buried under so much pain that they could not find their way out. "We're leaving Haven's Rest," her father continued. "Everyone is leaving. The government is organizing transports to take us somewhere safe, somewhere that can't find us. We're going to start over on a new world far away from here." For a moment, Lucy's face showed nothing. Then slowly, a single tear rolled down her cheek. "Will Emma be there?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Her father's heart broke at the question. He knelt beside her and took her hands in his. "No, sweetie, Emma is gone, she's not coming back, but we're going to survive. We're going to live. And one day, when you're older, you're going to help make sure that what happened to Emma never happens to anyone else. That's what we're fighting for now. That's why we have to leave." Lucy looked at Starlight, at the purple fur and big blue eyes that reminded her of everything she had lost. Then she looked at her father, at the love and determination in his face. "Okay," she said quietly, "I'll go." Across the planet, similar conversations were happening in millions of homes. Families were packing their belongings, saying goodbye to the places they had lived for generations, preparing to leave everything they knew behind. It was the hardest thing any of them had ever done, but they did it because they had no choice. They had taken their children. They had taken their safety, their peace, their faith in the galaxy's order. But they had not taken their will to survive. They had not taken their hope for the future. And they had not taken their determination to make the Empire pay for what it had done. Operation Exodus had begun. The great flight of humanity was. And somewhere in the darkness of space, in hidden colonies that they knew nothing about, the weapons of vengeance were being prepared. The galaxy would never be the same. Commander stood on the bridge of his observation station, watching the fleet depart from Haven's Rest. The 12 decimators had completed their mission and were returning to the core worlds. They left behind a planet in mourning, a species in shock, and a lesson that was supposed to keep humanity obedient for generations. But was not celebrating. He was not proud of what his empire had done. He had watched the footage of the attack, seen the children running and dying, heard their screams cut short by orbital fire. He had served for his entire life, but he had never felt shame until now. "Commander," his sensor officer said, "the fleet has cleared the system. We are ordered to resume our observation post." Nodded slowly, "Do it." The station moved back toward its original position, taking up its watch over Haven's Rest once again. Below, the humans were picking up the pieces of their shattered lives. They were burying their dead, comforting their survivors, trying to find some reason to keep going. Wondered what they would do next. Would they submit as the Empire expected? Would they bow their heads and accept their place as a lesser species? Or would they do something else, something unexpected, something that would change everything? He did not know the answer, but he had a feeling deep in his chest that the Empire had made a terrible mistake. Killing children was supposed to break a species, but sometimes it did the opposite. Sometimes it created something far more dangerous. Time would tell. The first evacuation ships left Haven's Rest 2 weeks after the massacre. They were disguised as cargo freighters, carrying goods to other colonies. In reality, they carried families, hidden in converted cargo holds, beginning the long journey to safety. Lucy Grant was on one of those ships. She sat with her parents in a small compartment, surrounded by other families from their town. The conditions were cramped and uncomfortable, but no one complained. They were alive. They were escaping. That was all that mattered. As the ship entered hyperspace, Lucy looked out a small window at the stars streaking past. Somewhere behind them was Haven's Rest, the only home she had ever known. Somewhere ahead was a new world, a new life, a new beginning. She held Starlight close and made a silent promise. She would never forget Emma. She would never forget Mr. She would never forget the 800,000 children who had died on Founding Day. And one day, when she was old enough, she would make the pay for what they had done. She was only 11 years old, but in that moment, looking out at the stars, she felt something change inside her. The child who had played games and dreamed of ice cream was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone colder, someone who understood that the galaxy was not a safe place and never would be. They had wanted to teach humanity a lesson. They had wanted to show humans what happened to species that grew too powerful. But the lesson humanity learned was not the one the Empire intended. Humans learned that no one would protect them. Humans learned that they could only rely on themselves. Humans learned that the galaxy was ruled by monsters who killed children for the crime of existing. And humans learned that they would have to become something new, something stronger, something terrifying if they wanted to survive. The exodus had begun. The transformation had begun. And somewhere in the hearts of 14 billion humans, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, a fire had been lit that would never go out. The Empire had made its move. Now it was humanity's turn.